Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take on a Monday morning. And after the start of a pretty bumpy ride in week one, it just continues now as we get into week two and we get into earnings season as well. We talk about that all the time. And earnings, of course, never really fully stops, but we start to kick it off in a big way when we start to get into the financials, which is where we're going to be starting off this week. But last week, wow, just a really interesting close to the week as far as how the markets were pretty bumpy, as we talked about. They sold off, and then a nice rally later in the day to close off into very much into the green, especially for the Nasdaq, up about 135 points. The Dow finished up a little over 50 points. S&P over 3,800. So a pretty nice completion to week one. We had a little bit of volatility, of course, and so the volatility kind of shifted up a little bit, but the volume on Friday, and we talk about volumes every week, every day, 48 million contracts trading on Friday. So certainly the activity levels that we are seeing are absolutely robust. They continue to be from 2020, but they seem to have been gaining a little bit of momentum as we got into November. We started to see the material space, the industrials, the financials take off. And then we got into December, same sort of a story, a little bit of a pause, if you will, I guess, for the technology and a bit of the biotech. But it's really hard to say that when you look over at biotech hitting highs, you see semiconductor hitting highs. So maybe a little bit of a pause in a couple of names, but I think in the overall picture, a pretty impressive move to the upside from that standpoint as well. So we did have a little bit of a break when we get into Friday. When we look at some of the names that had been really sort of moving us to the upside, it was energy, as financials, materials, and those. Little bit of a pause, nothing too terribly big. But we also had some names that were rocketing to the upside. Tesla, another move of close to 8%. The stock actually up to the 880 mark. Just an incredible run for that stock. And obviously the back and forth is going to continue, and it will continue for those that want to call it a automobile company and compare it to GM and Ford and all the rest of them. And then there are many who have said for a long time, it's technology stock. And the hardware part of the technology is exactly where the car is, but everything else and the ecosystem that has been created by Elon Musk. And so it depends on which camp you are, but obviously the move to the upside is clear and it's been there. Is it pricey? Absolutely. But this is just one of those names that has caught the attention of so many and been an absolute rocket ship. As a matter of fact, we had some incredible option activity in there last week that you really thought, well, maybe it'll take a little bit of time for this to react. It didn't. It took literally hours, days for it to move, and some substantial size trading in there as well. And something I think is really worth pointing out is when I talk about that in the 48 million contracts, Tesla was 3.1 million contracts of the volume, absolutely the number one leader in volume, followed by Apple, 1.7 million, NIO, 1.5 million. The next closest was Alibaba with 626,000 contracts. So that gives you some sort of an idea. We definitely are seeing volumes. We see volumes that are absolutely extraordinary. Pretty wide swath of different stocks, different categories once you get past that top three that certainly do stand out as far as the leaders are going. So we talk about the bumpy ride. The bumpy ride started in the morning. Dow down about 200 points. We had the Nasdaq down about 75 points, and you had the S&P getting hit by about 20 some odd points. Nothing huge, definitely a pullback, but nothing extraordinary down to the downside. But a lot of fear out there. A lot of people talking about all kinds of things, whether it's social media or whatever, and some of the repercussions of what was happening last week with the Capitol building and so forth. So there's a lot of conversation there. And then we got to the opening. We saw the technology stocks really start to extend down to the downside, down about 200 points on the Nasdaq out of the gate, down about 180 points on the Dow, and then about 24 points on the S&P. That has shifted very, very dramatically, especially by 9 a.m., the first 30 minutes of the day. We had cut into those Dow down about 100 and a quarter. We cut into the 200 point move to the downside on the Nasdaq. That was down about 100 and a quarter. S&P starting to show a little bit of resilience as well, but not a lot, still down about 20 points. By 9:30, yes, the Dow continues to be down about 130. Look over at the Nasdaq, it's only down a little over 100 points, and then add in some of the S&P as well. And that's been hanging in there right around that, we call it down about 20. What's really been part of the market that we've been following very, very closely, the 10-year. The 10-year just continues to move to the upside. Today, up another 2.5% or so. So well over 1% and establishing itself now about 1.13%. And then you look over at the VIX on that big spike right out of the gate, probably starting to ease back a little bit right now. It's not in front of me as we speak, but I'll tell you what were the winners last week were sort of what was leading the downside this week or today. And when I say today, the first 30 minutes, because we've already seen a pretty big shift, but consumer discretion definitely getting a push, materials, energy, technology, industrials, but healthcare really does stand out today. As a matter of fact, when I look at the weak areas of the marketplace, you got Twitter, a lot of conversation about that. You got Boeing, you've got BABA. So you've got a pretty broad piece of the marketplace. You've got Tesla, you got Freeport, you've got Occidental, you got cruise ships, you got airlines, you got casinos. Those were all to the downside today. But you look at the upside, you have Walgreens, you have Lilly, you had Gilead, you had Biogen, you had Merck. So really was healthcare that was really kind of buoying this, at least to some degree, on the upside. So we've seen this shift. I'll give you another really quick update as we speak. As a matter of fact, we're down about 90 points. We're down about 80 points on the NASDAQ. So yes, we've continued to kind of bring this thing back a little bit with some of the shifting. And some of the names that were getting hit the hardest are some of the names that are absolutely at least cutting into that somewhat. When you look at Twitter, it was down 10+%. That's come back a little bit. And across the board, when you look at some of those technology names that were getting hit, we're seeing a lot of that come back and maybe not go into positive territory, but we've certainly cut back in from where we pushed off there. So unusual option activity for today, I'm going to look at Citigroup. And why? Because we have all kinds of interesting unusual today to select from. But this one, we have earnings on Friday. We've talked about financials in this big move since November. And we've seen the rocket ship of a lot of these various names, whether it's JP Morgan or Citi or Goldman Sachs or Bank of America. You can go down the line of the financials, Capital One, and you can go into the credit card specific type names as well. You got the Squares, the PayPals, the FinTech, all of that. But Citi, stock was trading about $66 a share. We got 5,200 of the January 69 calls being bought. Now those, what makes that kind of interesting is 35 cents to 65 cents is the cost. So relatively lower end in terms of the cost for this trade, and under the fact that we know that we've got the catalyst of earnings in front of us, as well as the fact that the financials for the most part have had a really nice move to the upside over the last couple of months, that all sort of pieces together that this is a possibility. So we are seeing that for the unusual. There is a lot of unusual today already, and some repeat names. As a matter of fact, in the retail space, we just continue to see specific names that are hitting, it seems like, almost every single day, and they've been rewarded with moves to the upside. So I will get a little Q&A, and then we got to zip along. I know everybody's busy. I'm sorry I was a little bit late today. We had some technology issues, so I am back on a laptop. By the way, my guys over at the Minnesotan, love you guys, man. My bull shirts, these guys have it all. It's been fun, and a lot of the portions of what they're giving, what they sell these for, goes to Twin Cities Lime. So you are helping people out if you choose to buy any of that merchandise or whatever. Which sector is next to lead the markets? I'm seeing that question being asked. I'll tell you what, I still think that there are sectors that are leading the markets that will continue to be the leadership role. That doesn't mean that there aren't other names out there, but when I'm looking right now, I continue to look at the financials, for instance, and as we've seen this move in the 10-year, and we know what's going on in the markets. So those that have a market presence, a banking presence, I think that there's a possibility that there's still plenty of upside. And you look at the fundamentals of the balance sheets of a lot of these different financials, I still see upside, in my opinion. Now, everybody's going to have their opinion. Just sold more CY puts. What is your target price? Thank you, Scott. Hey, Scott. I love that name. I absolutely do. I own stock. That's it. I sell against my stock when the options are there and give me the ability to do so. I don't know what my target would be in this one. We have not had a lot of pullbacks along the way. It's been on a significant move to the upside. So For now, I'm riding it, and I will continue as long as I can to be able to find calls and sell calls against that position. But when you own the space like they do, it's a name that I will continue to own for a little while longer. Saw some large orders in Neo that expire this Friday. You know what? That has been an extraordinary name for a while now because it literally has been sitting there with Apple and Tesla so consistently. It's unbelievable. So we are seeing Neo time and time again. Doesn't mean they're necessarily right, but we have certainly seen a lot of volume, and we've seen a lot of call buying and a lot of open interest being created in Neo. So I am presently not in it. I have been in it. I've been out of it. I've been in it. There have been times where I've been in it for an extremely short period of time because it's moved so fast. And anybody who's traded in some of those names in the EV space understands what I'm talking about. You just got to stay disciplined and stay nimble because when they move fast to the upside, that certainly also means they can move fast to the downside at times as well. So hopefully I got you answered there. What do you think about Riot with today's downward move? It's a trader for me. I trade Riot. Again, very much like Neo, I think you have to have a short leash. I think you have to have extreme discipline and be very nimble. And when you get extraordinary moves like we oftentimes have seen in both those two names on explosive moves to the upside, I think it gives you a great ability to at least take some off. We talk about trimming all the time or exiting, but you've got to have your targets, and everybody's going to have a different target in place. But I think also the nice thing about some of these names is a name like Riot, it's on the lower end dollar wise, which also means that even though there's some implied volatility there, a lot of the time the options that we are seeing in there are not extraordinarily expensive options. So you at least have that limit for yourself to the downside as well. So something to keep in mind when you're trading, and that's just part of education and understanding how the options will move. And what your risk tolerance is, because everybody obviously is going to have a different risk tolerance as well. What about Apple going into earnings? I can tell you this, we've had some positive buying today, even in Apple. So I look at that and I say it almost every single quarter. I feel like they hit what they needed to hit. They've put up some record quarters. They actually haven't always been greeted with smiles for the record quarters, because we've seen some of those even get sold off. That get, in my opinion, creates that opportunity once again. When you put up a record quarter and the stock gets hit to the downside, and yet they even forecast is pretty solid, that tells me that that's creating an opportunity, unless I feel like something has really run to an extraordinary extent to the upside and it's just a completely overvalued company, which I don't feel about Apple. And they continue to have that cash generation. They continue to do things the right way internationally. I see the benefits there. So I like the options that we were seeing, a matter of fact, today in Apple. So I'll get you one more, and then I think we're going to have to go. WBA, that's Walgreens. I bought call options last week. Thoughts on this stock? I own the stock. I bought this stock because of the Amazon story, and that now is going back a couple of months, I guess. And that was that Amazon was going into that space and was going to take all the paper, right? And take it all. Well, that hasn't happened in the past. We've talked about this before on the take, and I don't see that happening into the future either. I think we've already seen an incredible rebound out of Walgreens. Today, we're seeing a number of upgrades for Walgreens, one of the better performers today. I will continue to hold this one, and like many of the stocks that I hold, I will be selling calls against it when it's appropriate, when I'm getting enough premium to make sense and an out of the money call. And that's going to be my approach, I think, for a while, unless something dramatically changes, like Merck, like Apple, like Microsoft, like so many of the stocks that I own in my portfolio. When something changes, yeah, you're going to have to react. But until that time, I'm willing to hold on to some of these names. Walgreens has really been a great mover since that dramatic push to the downside. That seems to be the reaction every time Amazon goes into anybody's space. Guys, I know it's going to be a busy day. I know everybody's excited about this week and the earnings week kicking off and everything else. So am I. Let's get after it. And by the way, we got a webinar on Wednesday. I'll probably talk about that Tuesday and Wednesday, but myself and AJ on Wednesday after the close. So look forward to that as well on Market Rebellion site. Guys, take care. Have a great day of trading.